Hello once more, and welcome to another exciting edition here. Today we're going to be discussing well, a couple of things. First, let's start with the first things, I guess. So if you go back in time, people have always asked for help. I mean, it's been, if you go back to the time of, since the time of crucifixion practically, where people would be hanged and then other people would ask them for help, and of course they wouldn't get help. So people have been asking for help.
That's a very dramatic beginning.
For a long time. Okay, we need to shut this down. Sorry. And so anyway, so that was that. Then if you advance forward, if you go forward in time, and I don't have a picture right now, but you probably have seen, if you advance many centuries, because otherwise it'll take too long. I said this was going to be an in-depth interview, but I don't mean we're going to go through the whole history of the world. So then you advance all the way to the 60s when the Beatles were around, and they asked for help explicitly by coming out with an album called Help. If you saw some of my posts, you saw that they were asking for David Amerland to help them, and unfortunately, help wasn't available at the time. So then they took it to the next step, and they actually put out a movie asking for help, and even that was not answered correctly. Even though I don't think they need that much help, but obviously it was a cry for help right there. So people have been asking for help for a long time, and if we get to the modern age, there was, once people started getting online and getting their businesses online, it became very clear that everybody wants to be at the top of Google because everybody and their brother was using Google to try to find things, and so people started having pages with all kinds of text that nobody could see with the word sex in it because that's the most used word, and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, just to be able to get ranked higher on Google, which was of course total nonsense, and Google kind of killed the whole notion over the years to the point where you can't game the stuff at all. If you're going to be a phony, if you're not going to be providing quality content and legitimate content, you're going to be downgraded by Google. It's as simple as that. And so the whole SEO thing came to play, and some of you may not know what SEO means. A lot of people come to me for SEO help because they think that SEO, it's almost like you can read it like SE, like C, and then O is of course the first letter of my name, so it's like C Oleg. And so a lot of people come to me when they see SEO, they think I can help them with that, and that's somewhat accurate, but not totally accurate. SEO actually stands for Search Engine Optimization, and it's a way to properly create content on the internet so the search engines, such as Google being the main one, are able to take this information from your content and be able to position you appropriately within their search engine to make it easier for people to find you if they're looking for the kind of stuff that you provide. That's basically what search engine optimization is all about. And over there in the little thumbnail below, you see a very dear friend of mine who happens to be one of the leading authorities on the subject of SEO. He wrote a number of books. He's an analyst. He's a multinational company consultant, speaker, all-around great guy. I can say it looking at his face right there. And after many personal experiences. But also what he is an author of many books, and one of the latest books that he has, not one of the latest, but the latest book that he just came out is called SEO Help, and I'll give you the exact name here. It says 20 Semantic Search Steps that will help your business grow. See, the name is so long, I had to actually read it off the screen. But seriously speaking, it's I got a copy of this book not long ago after it came out, and I read it, and there's a tremendous number of things in this book that are totally worth discussing, and it's a great book. I mean, I'll tell you up front, you don't have to wait till the end of the show to hear how great I think this book is. But before we get started on the whole thing and go through the thing, I want to introduce the man himself, the author, the one and only David Amerland. Welcome, David.
Oleg, thank you very much for that awesome introduction. It's the first hangout on air I've had that we started with a crucifixion. So hopefully,
Somebody
will. Yeah. I'm glad to be here. I'm actually eager to discuss a lot of the things you touched on.
Excellent, excellent. So without further ado, I said this was gonna be an in-depth interview and review of the book, and that's exactly what I meant. So I think what we'll do is, after a short introduction here about the book, just from my perspective, then I think what we'll do is we'll go through these 20 steps. And when I said in depth, I didn't mean we're actually going to read the book, from beginning to end. But at the same time, I do want to go. Hopefully, David will oblige me with taking his take in a very kind of, as briefly as he wants to make it, on every single one of these steps in the book. So this will give you a good idea of what's in this book, why this book is so. There's a number of things which I'll mention in a second here, why this book is extremely compelling for any business. I don't care if you're a brand new business, if you've been in business for dozens of years, if you're in the middle, it doesn't really matter. And it doesn't really matter if what makes this great book is not just for people who are at at the CEO level, or somebody who is a intern coming into a company to do some SEO work. It's relevant to all these people and any of these people, and that's what makes this book such a great book in my view. But so we'll go through the steps. So the main thing about this book that I can say why I think everybody should be getting this book, and the book, by the way, is available on Amazon and all the usual book retailers, Barnes and Noble. You can get it everywhere now, and you can get it in print form, you can get it in digital form, so however you want to get it. But the reason I think this book is so excellent is because it's fairly short. I mean, it's less than 200 pages, about 190 pages. So it's a fairly quick read. But at the same time, it touches on all the important things dealing with search engine optimization. This is something that some people refer to as science, other people refer to as art. Personally, I think it's a combination of the two, because there are certain things you, as a person trying to learn this and implement it in your business, there are certain things that you need to know. And David certainly goes through every single of those things step by step, and he breaks it down to steps. It makes it much more manageable for people to understand what this is. And so it's the whole process from beginning to end. Like I said, it's not a long read, but at the same time, it's extremely compelling, broken down to 20 pieces that you just simply need to sit and follow. So that makes it really easy, because a lot of times you read books and the book goes and it gives you all this philosophy and history, and this is why, and before too long you're completely lost. You know the 3 letters SEO, and you're just completely and totally lost with all this jargon, all this tech stuff. I mean, it just completely and totally, it's not that these books are bad, but it kind of, you wind up feeling overwhelmed and lost at the same time. And at the same time, there was always this desire from business standpoint. Well, I'm just going to get this book so I can get to Google on #1, to be on #1 Google. And I always told my clients and people who ask me about this stuff is that, look, if anybody is promising you they're going to get you #1, the #1 place on the first page of Google, they're lying through their teeth. And you can use simple logic to verify that. Let's say you're a jeweler, for example. I don't care who you are, plumber, construction worker, author, I don't care who you are. The problem is that when you're dealing with something like the web, something that has billions of people using it, and there's only one basically search engine that most people use, which is Google, nobody can guarantee you that they're going to help you, if you use the word plumbing, to be in the top 10 spots even on Google, because think how many plumbers are there worldwide. It's just, they're lying through their teeth when they tell you they can guarantee it, or they're guaranteed with some horrible sentence that you have to type in to be able to be in that spot, which nobody ever uses. So the whole idea of SEO being specifically where somebody can come in and do the magic for you is nonsense. Okay, there's some people who can do it better than others by using certain approaches and certain techniques, but even that's been kind of going down for those people with Google's releases of their new search engine, because they want, bottom line is they want good content, and that's what they're going to index, and it needs to be set up in a certain structured way. And as David pointed out in some of his recent articles, is even this whole concept of being in the #1 spot is flawed, because now Google search engine comes back with results based on individuals, based on what they want and what they're looking for that particular person. So the results that I come up with for the same search that versus what David would come up with would be different anyway. So there's no such thing as number one or in the top 10 on the first page anyway. With that said, it's extremely important, even maybe even more important than ever, to be able to do the search engine optimization properly, and that's what this book is about. It gives you specific 20 steps of how to go about doing search engine optimization to be better found on Google, meaning better found for your potential customers, for your current customers, for anybody who might be looking for you. And that's obviously the name of the game. That's why you're in business, is to be able to be found so you can get business. So that's kind of the steps. I mean, that's kind of an obvious thing. So the reason, again, why this book is so compelling to me is that it's a quick, brief way to get into it, having specific steps that you need to undertake, okay? And then once you undertake these steps, then you're going to be in a completely different place in terms of everything you do online if you actually follow these steps. That's the good news. Before I turn it over to David, I'm going to give you the bad news too. So the bad news is that even though there's only 20 steps, and each of those 20 steps has 10 action points. So, very short. I mean, the 10, like Google comes up with 10 results on the page, David has 10 steps you need to take. And so you would think it's not that much, but if you can consider the fact that there's 20 steps and each one has 10 action steps, now we're talking 200 action items that you need to do. So even though it is brief and you can quickly get to doing this, so that's the great part. At the same time, don't think that this is something that one evening read and you're all done. You're not. This is just beginning. This book is a guide for you. And when I say you, I mean you individually, your business individual, because again, if anybody gives you a book telling you what you should do in your plumbing business, they have no clue because they don't know your plumbing business. And your plumbing business is different from somebody else's plumbing business. What's great about David's book is he doesn't tell you that this is specifically for you. What he's giving you is he's giving you the tools and abilities to look into your business with your knowledge of the business and then use his steps and his action items to consider what should be done to propel it where it needs to be easily found in Google, and to be properly, your online presence, in other words, be done exactly how it should be in terms of being able to be found and so on and so forth. So with that, David, do you have a few words about all this before we get into the steps?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'll just focus on one thing you said. You said essentially that SEO is a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science, and that's very true. It's always been the case. It always will be the case. And the fact that it's a very strange business, because companies that have SEO in place really need to continue to do so. It's not something you can apply only once. And certainly anybody who works online needs to be found, needs to apply these principles. And search is the window through which we find anything. So in many ways the book is practical at a level which is customizable to each business. And that's really the strength of it. And I've tried to make it as simple as possible as you go through it. So the primary principle for me when I was writing it was to essentially embed a virtual expert in the hands of the person reading the book. And that's what it's designed to do.
Great. So let's go ahead and actually specifically get into the book itself. And so I apologize for not remembering all the steps in my head, so I'll just kind of read them off the screen.
Well, I'm not sure I do, so you're going to be
I'll help you then. I'll help you. I'll be your guide to your own book. There we go. How's that? Okay, so step number one, and this is one of the things that, just to briefly here, the step number one is called Google account. And David, shows exactly what you need to do from the very beginning. So this is not a book for somebody who's been necessarily in business already, or been online, I should say, not in business, been online. This is a book, an excellent book for somebody starting with nothing. I mean, David's first step is Google account, where he actually indicates to what many of you will already be considering that we've had it for years. Why is he even talking about it? Because there are businesses who start out daily, and there are people who are coming into the whole concept, but they've never done this before. And so what David does And you'll be hearing me saying this is a great book over and over, because all these things to me are what makes it such a compelling thing to have for everybody, is that even if you're starting with absolutely nothing, you just started a business yesterday, you're totally gung-ho, you don't know anything about SEO, you can't even spell SEO, much less do anything with SEO. This is the book that will let you start from the very, very beginning and advance all the way to the end of where you need to be. So the very first step specifically talks about how to even set up a Google account to get going. In other words, David is assuming here that you have absolutely nothing potentially, and then going forward from there. So the first step, Google account, David.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I mean, the importance of having a Google account can't be understated enough, overstated enough, I should say. Essentially, Google is central to search, as we well know. It's a data company. Your Google account enables you to control very much the data that you actually put online and to determine how it affects what you do. So if we assume that everything which you do leaves a digital footprint, not having a Google account, having multiple Google accounts, as I've seen time and again, and misusing them, having a Google account which you don't know how to use properly is basically critical to how that data begins to surface. And essentially, it puts you in control of your digital identity, and that's why it's so critical. Like everything else, there are 10 steps at the end of each chapter, and those 10 steps, or those 10 questions sometimes, or 10 action points, allow you to formulate your own strategy when it comes to that. So the book is, like every chapter, this chapter is not prescriptive to the extent that it is restrictive, but it's prescriptive to the extent that it is enabling.
Sorry, David, I'm just trying to pull up. Okay, next step here we have is, and that's one of the, I guess we can touch a little bit more on that. So in terms of having multiple accounts, because I had a lot of people come to me and they tell me I have this account set up and I have that account set up, and
yes.
and okay, so you have this account set up, and what's what do you use it for? I never checked that account. So it's important to follow the steps, set up an account. It's part of your step 2, which is your identity. And so it's important to understand, yes, you can have multiple accounts, and yes, it's painfully simple to set them up, but at the same time, there needs to be a strategy in place. So definitely follow the steps, all the steps. I mean, in the first 2 steps that David has, it's mostly has to do with certain things you need to consider and certain things you need to do, but you don't necessarily need to write anything down or create a strategy, so to speak, which is something that's going to come up with step 3 and so on, where you physically have to do something. And by the way, at the end of this hangout, we're going to bring a little special thing that nobody has seen yet, that David and I has been working on. So we'll get to that at the end. So for now, David, the second step is identity.
Yes, and identity is critical. Essentially, if we think that in the real world we actually connect to people and form relationships with them, we manage to work with them, or sometimes choose not to work with them, simply because of a choice which we make based on our perception of who they are. That is the superficial and very real impact of identity. At a deeper level, identity comes with brand values or values themselves, practices, working methodologies. And what's worth bearing in mind is that essentially, although we feel that we know who we are, we feel as a person behind our eyes which has a very distinct existence and ancestor-specific name, in reality, if we start deconstructing all this, we realize we're not. We're just a conglomeration of parts in many ways. So we're a construct in our personal identity. Our business identity is also a construct. And the difference really is that in the real world, there's a structured process which allows the creation of our identity almost on an automated basis. The moment you're born, you're given a name, you have an ethnicity, you live in a particular house, in a particular neighborhood, in a particular city, in a particular country. All those things form at the beginning the basis of your identity, and sort of layers add to this up to the point where you are able to make your own decisions. On a digital plane, we have to make every single decision. And we don't. A lot of the times, we sort of think, oh, I have a website, I have a business, I need a logo. We think of these things almost automatically in sort of siloed kind of compartments, but we should actually be thinking about them in a more holistic sense, and we should be taking that into account in everything we do. And identity creation in the digital world now is every bit as important as in the physical world, and they're beginning to converge. So that's the importance of it.
Excellent. Next step we have is Google Plus profile.
Yes. Now we're talking about Google Plus, and we've just come through a phase where we still had some articles in the press about Google Plus is dead, and now there's some question marks. Will Google abandon Google Plus? And we seem to go through like Halley's Comet on a very short periodicity through this phase where the articles come out, we rebut them, Google doesn't say anything, it goes away, and then it comes back again. Now I must say, Google Plus for Google is central to its data gathering capabilities. It's very, very important in terms of the identity extraction process it has put in place. When Google Plus first came along, it was critical. Now it's not so much so. Google has been scaling across the web. New technologies are coming into play. New methodologies are being applied. So it doesn't depend on Google Plus exclusively, but it is still a large part of its central strategy. Which is to say that if you ignore Google Plus, well, the sky isn't going to fall on you, but you are basically hamstringing yourself quite badly, and you should be taking the time to actually really understand what's happening here and really get involved in a way that's beneficial to you.
Yeah, and I personally do. I mean, mostly I do some of the SEO stuff for myself, but because I do IT consulting, I do have people coming to me to with help all kinds of IT, including doing web design for people. I mean, doing websites, doing SEO, helping them with blogs, I mean, different things like that, content. And one of the things that I noticed myself that I'm a huge Google Plus fan, have been since its inception basically. I used to have a Facebook account which I closed the very day I set up my Google Plus account, and I never looked back. The only reason right now you can find me on Facebook with 0 posts anywhere is because I have to have something to log in to be able to manage some accounts for other people, and they want to be on Facebook, so I don't really have any choice. It's like being dragged through the mud with my hands tied and my eyes closed, because they're doing it to me, not because they want to do it. I do everything I do on Google Plus only on Google Plus, but in terms of my content. I do some cross-posting to Twitter, but mostly that, definitely not Facebook or anything else. Not to say that that's what you should be doing, but I'm a big fan of Google Plus. That's the main point I'm trying to make. And I'm not going to go into all the details why that is, but obviously David stated why Google Plus is important from not just a use standpoint and convenience and all kinds of capabilities you just don't get anywhere else practically, but also from the search engine optimization standpoint. And one of the things that I noticed in doing posts for other people on Facebook is just amazing to me just how much more capabilities you have on Google Plus. And when you actually post to different platforms, you can see the difference between working with them. And believe it or not, it's actually a completely different feeling when you're posting to Facebook. Even though the content might be similar, it's a totally different way. And maybe it's me personally, I don't know, David, how it is for you, but for me, there's no comparison in terms of using other platforms in Google+.
Well, it really depends on your immediate circle of contacts and how they've come about. But in a more general sense, certainly the feel of Facebook is designed to be different because it is more closed in terms of the set, and the people you sort of tangentially come across there have an entirely different intent and interest. Than the people who you're going to meet in G+. And that really affects their behavior. I mean, you can get the same person coming from Facebook who might conceivably quite happily troll what you put there because he just happened to be in the mood to do that. Then he gets into Google Plus and engages in a really thoughtful discussion on a very similar topic or even the same topic, simply because the frame set is different, the mindset that goes with it is different, and the environment is different.
Right. Yeah, no question about it. So definitely set up Google Plus profile. Step number 4 is other digital profiles.
Yes, I mean, we all have a number of digital profiles. Most of us have a Twitter account. We still have Facebook accounts, as Oleg just said. We have presences in LinkedIn and other sort of smaller social network platforms or even digital platforms. And until very recently, they used to be all compartmentalized. We used them because we felt we had to use them, but we didn't really connect them very much. We didn't try to make sure that there was a consistency in the way they appeared, the way they were being used. And now this is becoming, again, a critical point in terms of creating the digital identity. Google is in the process of identifying and unifying these independently of us. But the more we actually help in that process by normalizing how we behave and how we appear, obviously, the better the process is going to be.
David, sorry to put you in the corner here, but do you have a personal preference and personal preference and personal opinion, basically, on the subject? If a new company was going to do social media and they would have multiple profiles to try to maximize their presence, yes. Number one, I guess I'm sure you probably agree that not a good idea to just cross-post everything the same way to everywhere.
No,
not the best way.
Customized. Yes, exactly. I mean, right. You really talk to your audience, which is different in every platform.
Right. And then the second thing is, do you have any specific preference? Because we're talking, we got, the big ones, Google+, we got Facebook, we got Twitter, but also you have things like Instagram, and you have things like Pinterest, and you have, some of the smaller ones that are also pretty active. So your personal take, and again, I apologize for putting you in the corner here, but do you have a specific recommendation you would give to somebody that, yes, there's no way, there's only 24 hours a day, only 7 days a week, you cannot possibly, unless you spend a lot of money or a lot of time, go everywhere with customized content for each different audience, potentially, on and on. So to shrink it down to, like the book is, talking specifics and simple, what platforms would you recommend people use?
Okay, when it comes to platforms, the answer, and I always advise this independently, is that you always go with the flow. What's easiest for you? Because that's where you have to start from. So you play to your strengths always. If you have a Facebook crowd which you can connect to very quickly, do that. If you're very good on Twitter, this is your starting point. If LinkedIn is where you're really comfortable at and you can really make an impact, use that. If you have a strong visual content which works on Instagram or Pinterest and you know how to use them, brilliant. That's what you do. So always you try to play from the strongest position and then expand outwards as necessary. My own personal preference is G+, simply because of the depth of engagement and the length and breadth of the interaction that I get here, which is beyond any other kind of platform. But that is a personal preference. It doesn't actually impact on the professional side. So professionally, starting a business is saying, okay, what's my easiest, biggest win? And that should be a starting point.
Do you think it's important for somebody, you're already talking about somebody who's in social media doing and so on. What about people who haven't done anything yet? I mean, they picked up your book literally, and the first thing it tells them to set up a Google account, which they do not have yet. So they're really starting at the starting point. They don't have any, they've heard the word Facebook, they may have heard the word Pinterest, although they don't even know how to spell it. In other words, people just don't know. So yes. For real newbies, what would you recommend to start with? Would you recommend
Again, there's going to be a strength which is innate to them, the way they operate and the way they think. So, even if let's assume that you're a digital virgin, you've never been on the web before, and you're getting online, well, definitely you need a Google account. That will automatically bring you into Google+. Right. But before you even sort of start getting to grips with Google+ and thinking this is the path for me, think, what are you good at? If you're good at taking pictures, you need to explore something else first, like perhaps Pinterest or Instagram. If you have a strong friend network who are active in the profession you're in, and they all happen to be on Facebook because you've connected with them, well, that should be your starting point because it's ready-made. So really you need to go for the easy wins every time.
Right. But like I said, even if you don't have anybody, then I guess, like you said, as for people who are looking for a very, very beginning point, yeah, you start out with Google account, you got your Google+, start doing it there, and then from there you can expand. I guess the best thing to do is to try to find your ideal audience, if you will. A lot of people talk about it, but it's it's one of those things that is a continuously moving target, because what does that exactly mean? And that could be a discussion for a whole other hangout, just talking about that. But the idea is, like David mentioned, if you do know where your intended audience seems to gather the most, or would have the most possibility of being, then that's where you would attack. Just like anything else you do in business, you advertise somewhere where you think would give you best benefit, best return on the investment. So it's the same kind of thing here. Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. That's really sound advice to always have in mind.
Okay. Next step we have is called content.
Okay. Uh, well, we live in
Simple.
the age of content. Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing the words content is king since 2004 stroke 2005. That's when it started coming into our attention. And, we have never really defined exactly what it's supposed to do. And certainly we have abused it in those years between 2005 and 2012. We saw content being abused to an extreme degree by giving us very thin, low-value kind of content to access across the web. Now, essentially, content is anything. It can be your advertising. It can be, your website itself in terms of what you have there, and certainly anything which you create. And those things have to impact on everything else we've covered now. After now, they have to impact on your identity. They have to impact on your values. They have to become a way that you project these things. And if we, for a moment, forget the digital world entirely, if you think of the way you are dressed as you get out of the house in the morning, well, that's essentially content because you've made some decisions on what you're going to wear, which sends a direct visible signal to those around you, which you have decided is how you want them to perceive you. So there's a message there in that kind of situation. That shows the attention to detail that we subconsciously pay in the offline world. We have very, very sort of semantically dense data presence. In the digital world, we don't do that. We tend to think, oh, I need a website. Any website will do. I need some content. Oh, I'm going to plaster 100 words here and 100 words there. And it's not. Everything should actually be taken into consideration, and a lot of attention has to be paid into all these things. And I accept it's difficult, but if we don't do it, then we get into a situation we have always seen where you get a digital business that has cost a certain amount of money, it's costing time to maintain and effort, and it's not really paying off.
Right. And obviously, we spoke, just to come back for a second, to other digital profiles and content. Like David mentioned, it's best to create content for that particular platform. As you can see by the pillow next to David, you can see what he prefers. I mean, you don't even need to ask a question right there. But also in terms of perception, I know I said that David does consulting for multinational companies, and David just said that your content is supposed to represent, be representative of you, even your clothes and everything else. So I just want to make sure everybody understands. Just because David is wearing sports-type clothes, that does not mean he never wears suits and ties. I just want to make sure that you understand that. Right, David?
Well, absolutely.
Actually, David, you know what? I'll ask you for a personal favor here.
Yes, sure.
I need you to share with me a photo of you wearing a suit and a tie. I'd like to see that.
Okay. I actually have some. Yeah, okay, I will do that. As soon as the hangout is over, I'll go through my drive and send you one.
Excellent.
But yeah, I try these days not to do that very much. Simply, and again, this is a personal choice. I go into very big corporations wearing very casual clothing, and that's by design. I think we need more and more to get past the initial perception of a label, which signifies something which assume it signifies, and actually understand the content. And this goes whether it's a person wearing a very expensive suit. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're any better than you in what they do or know any better.
Right.
All it means is they can afford a very expensive suit. Same thing with a website. You get to an expensive looking website, it shouldn't automatically mean that they're a better business than anybody else who does things in a perhaps more considerate way and puts a lot more effort into it. So really we need that kind of veracity checking, if you like, in our everyday life.
And I think one of the key things that needs to be mentioned here about, since we're on the subject of content, is that, as David mentioned, the website itself, yeah, you can pay a ton of money or create your own website that will be spectacular looking, and all kinds of animations, all kinds of different things you can do, but that does not necessarily mean that you're going to have great content on it, which simply means that even if you get some traffic initially, after publicizing it and everybody goes, wow, this is spectacular looking, they're not coming back unless you give them the kind of content that they're looking for. And of course, that's the same thing with search engines. They're trying to index you to give the proper content to the people. And it's one of these situations where, what kind of content do you create? And this is the kind of question that nobody can answer specifically for you but yourself, being in the business, because it definitely needs to be something that would be the most important thing, I mean, if you bring it down, let's just try to take the abstract form and bring it down to the real minimal, or the lowest bottom common denominator, I guess, if you will. And that is that essentially you're doing everything you're doing in business to get more business and to make money and to be successful. That's the idea of running a business. Otherwise, it'd be a hobby. So if you're running a business and you're trying to be successful and make money, your intent is to sell a product or a service, or maybe it's even yourself, but the bottom line is you're selling something to somebody. You cannot run a business without transferring something to other people, because they're not going to pay you for nothing. Okay? They're not. And so it's always about selling something, and something of value, because a lot of people sell stuff. It needs to be something of value. So when you bring it down to that level where you're trying to sell something of value, why would somebody want to buy this from you when they can buy it from somebody else? Well, number one is because it's you. So in other words, it needs to be you. What I mean by that is the content needs to reflect you as a person, so people can see the difference between you, plumber, and a million other plumbers that essentially are doing the same thing.
Isn't it? I mean,
it's back to
all
the
about
idea. Right, right.
Yeah.
Second thing, which David totally preaches in practically everything he does, is in addition to being positive and doing the right thing, so to speak, you need to be honest. Because if you're honest with people and you project exactly how things are, they wind up giving you, the little five-letter word, which is trust. And then once you get the trust, then that's basically the last step before you actually make a sale, is for them to trust you. They're not buying from you anything if they don't trust you. Or if you're trying to be really creative and phony about it, they may buy from you this one time, but they're never coming back. I know I'm the kind of person that there's no way in heck I'm coming back to buy anything from you if I find out that somehow you broke my trust. And as David pointed out to me in a hangout we had last time, and a number of times we discussed, it's very, very difficult to build trust. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes obviously honesty, and it takes integrity. But it's incredibly easy to break it, and then almost impossible to get it back, because we humans are obviously flawed in many ways, as well as good in many ways, and we can sway either way. We can be truthful, we can be honest, we can be dishonest, we can be horrible. I mean, all of us have ability to be any of these things, and it's just a question, the way I look at it, is how low, so to speak, you allow yourself to get, or how high you allow yourself to get, and your values and what you stick to, and how, quote unquote, as people call me, black and white you are, and things like that. So it's really about sales based on trust, that this whole effort that we're doing offline and online, that's all it's all about. Okay? It doesn't necessarily, like I said, mean sales of tangible things. It could be sales of your ideas. It could be all kinds of stuff. But to be able to get there, you need to create content online. In other words, when we're talking like this, when I'm talking to you, looking in your eyes and things like that, you can actually see my gestures, you can see my tone, you can hear my voice, and you can gauge the sincerity or insincerity after a number of these kind of connections. You can kind of tell. When you're doing stuff online on websites or blogs or Google+, social media, people don't know you necessarily. Okay? They don't know you, so your content is the way you let them, you basically present the information you want them to know about you, about your business, about what you're trying to sell or give to them, and things like that. That's, I think, where the important thing about content is, that it A, needs to be you as a person, and B, it needs to be presented in such a way where it's honest, with integrity, and to build trust. And then you'll get the kind of benefits from having this content that you're trying to get. Any thoughts, David?
No, I think you covered it very nicely there. I think it's always important to realize that trust goes through 4 stages, which are governed by contact, perception, assessment, and connection. You only get to the connection part if the first 3 are right. So the contact has to be right, the perception you generate has to be right. If you walk into a cocktail party wearing heavy leathers and boots, perception is immediately wrong because everybody else is in tuxedos, perhaps,
right.
And you're making things harder for yourself. And then, after those two, we get into the assessment stage where the content actually comes in and everybody begins to evaluate what you say and how you say it and how correct it is or not. And then we get to the connection. So everything is quantified in the digital domain as it is in the offline world and quantifiable. And we need to be aware of all the different steps. We need to have a kind of attention to detail.
Right. So to bring it down to the one final sentence is try to write content that will build trust in people, and then you'll be able to succeed online. Next step is voice.
Yes, I mean, the voice is critical in how you say things. Essentially, if we look at what happened before, up to about 2010, 2011, websites used to all pretty much say all the same thing about the same thing. Everybody was quality focused, customer centric, proactive. What does that even mean? It's different websites selling from shoes to digital software said the same things. And that's just the kind of approach which treats customers, potential customers, like sheep, doesn't take into account the fact they're individuals who can think for themselves, doesn't take into account that they're as intelligent as the people who have the website. And you need to do that. The moment you do that, then you start talking like a real person. You say, this is what I do, or this is what we do, this is why we do it, this is why we do it differently. And this is why we would absolutely love to do business with you. And if you describe those things in those terms, well, then people begin to actually relate to you a lot better.
Absolutely. So you need to have your own unique voice and project the right stuff. Engagement is the next step.
Yes. Now, suppose you have the best website in the world doing the best thing ever possible, and nobody knows about it. This is like the question of the tree falling in the forest and no one being around. It really doesn't make any kind of noise because, who knows? So really, that's the kind of thing. If you don't have any kind of engagement, if you're not reaching people, if you're not touching them, if you're not getting some kind of response and feedback from them, then basically you're failing. You're failing in business. In business, everything's about relationships, connections. You need to have that motive point. You need to understand what is important to people. And it's not just about the product, because if that was the case, then all we need is a product or a service and a specifications sheet, and that's it. We'll be done. So really, people like doing business with people, even when the people on the other side are a very large company, and they'd like to actually sense that there's a shared values and a shared connection, a level of humanity behind it all.
Absolutely, yes, and engaging in terms of comments, engaging in terms of +1s like on Google+, likes on Facebook. People, obviously businesses need to be cognizant of, if you're going to do social media, don't make it a one-way street. If people write some comment, doesn't matter if it's good or bad. If it's good, then you get a pat on the back for doing the right thing. If it's bad, it's basically also good because it gives you a pause to look at something you may not have seen that you or your employees are doing, to do something better, to improve something. So if anything, any kind of negative feedback, unless it's from some kind of total moron that just does it because he can, in those cases you deal with it differently. But in terms of anybody giving you constructive criticism, then definitely take it with proper interaction with this person to try to make things better. And so there's a great way to take people who are somewhat dissatisfied for good reason with you and turn a negative into a major positive, with people just willing to to basically do just about anything for you, promote you and everything else. I've seen it time and again, that people do these kind of things, and it's wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful when you can. So you definitely need to get the engagement thing going. Hashtags is the next one, David.
Yes. Now, we're getting a little bit technical here. Essentially, the power of the web, the power of semantic search now, is its ability to categorize things into groupings which actually make sense and create a level of authority around a person or a company. So hashtags come into this. Essentially, hashtags allow you to categorize a little bit what you do. So you need to have them into your strategy. If you're posting things about, I don't know, computers, for instance, not all the time, but certainly sometimes, those need to be clearly identified, simply because it allows search to understand what it is. These come up, are indexed and come up in search itself. It allows Google to understand what you do when you're operating Google+. And it allows in the creation of your digital identity, the creation of expertise, essentially, and that is a necessary element of any kind of business identity.
Right. And so basically, what you're doing is you're creating, you're trying to simplify things and create a certain structured way of calling data. Like, for example, David started this whole online movement for pictures of clouds, and there's a hashtag called Cloud Wars, which he
Yes.
totally got me hooked on that. And
So
I
it's a
even
community now.
exactly, it's now a community of people, that deal with, you would think that, of all the different things that you would do, why would be that? And you'd be amazed to find how many people actually participate in it. They're all using the hashtag Cloud Wars, so it's very easy for you to just do a search for, # and the word Cloud Wars, one word. Case is irrelevant. You can type it all lowercase. And it's just important not to put any spaces or anything, just one word like that. And so then you can see what other people are doing in that particular realm. And there's a lot of different, people do all kinds of, hashtags. Mia Voss, one of my favorite online hosts, she's got this one hashtag called Bad Crap Crazy.
Yes.
So people do all kinds of stuff for different purposes. But the idea here is, like I said, it's a way to create a structured simplification of your content, so it's easier for search engines to index it and easier for people to find it. Like, one of the things that I personally do is and you can create your own, or you can participate in other people's. In addition to doing Cloud Wars, I have a hashtag I use called Day Shots, where whenever I'm in the store and there's USA Today with some major news that are just, serious major news, I just take a picture and I post it with this hashtag Day Shots. So the idea is, many years later, whatever it's going to be, my son, who is also a big G+ user, he's 10 right now, he'll be able many years from now to, just go and type in this hashtag Day Shots and see what kind of things his father found to be amusing, useful, incredible, some 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So it's amazing to be able to then, it's almost like a time capsule. And of course, in addition to using it for these interesting or useful things on a personal level, you can totally use it for business. You can, so if people are looking for, SEO help, then I'm sure you can find all kinds of posts dealing with SEO help by typing hashtag SEO help. So hashtags are definitely useful way to, get this a little bit of a structure and simplification into your data. Just don't go nuts, writing a post with 2 sentences and then 100 hashtags to go with it. That's totally counterproductive. But certainly use certain ones and use them consistently, either to help yourself find some of your posts later on, or have other people find them and make them known. A lot of people use hashtags also for campaigns. So you're running some kind of promotional marketing campaign, and you put certain hashtags, and you ask people to go ahead and use that particular hashtag as part of the post for that campaign, and then later maybe it's a sweepstakes or something like that. So it's got many different uses, and definitely should be using them. And for more details, just read the chapter on that particular step. Next step we have is called ontologies. David, please explain what it is.
Okay.
I'm sure
Ontologies is a more formalized way of basically saying categories, and hashtags are part of this. So this leads naturally into that. But essentially, it should be part of your broader thinking. When you create content, it shouldn't just be, oh, here's some content, we just throw it on the web and hope for the best. When you are sharing stuff, again, it shouldn't be, certainly it can be spontaneous, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but in the broader sense of the word, there should be a method to the madness. There should be some kind of thing which, if we take a step back and look throughout the year, and perhaps you have 100 posts or 1,000 posts, we should actually be able to see a structure and a direction which then allows us to say, hey, Oleg does this, and David does that, and the two are distinctly different, although on a personal level, there's a huge overlap in what they do as people and what they're interested in. And that's exactly what ontologies do. So, and I'm simplifying the term here, but in semantic search is a very important aspect, and every business, every person who works digitally should actually bear it in mind.
But ontology is basically a process of simplification, correct?
It's a process of grouping specific areas of subject areas and themes, really. So it comes under, what are you doing in terms of, if you have 100 posts and 60 of them, for instance, are about, let's say, there could be about equality.
IT.
Yeah,
Okay.
IT. Okay,
Right.
instantly that would brand you as an IT-orientated expert, because that's your thing. Even though the other 40 posts are about something else.
The Beatles.
Yes, yes. We'll know you're not a musician. We'll know you're an IT person.
No, but I still post a lot. I used to play drums back in my prior life. And speaking of the Beatles, we talked about the Beatles in the beginning a little bit. I just wanted to add a little more that if Sir Paul McCartney is listening in the audience, because he was one of the people asking for help, and he wants to join us, by all means. It's the same time as for David. So, Sir Paul, if you're listening, by all means, just let me know. You want to jump in, we'll definitely give you
Make it happen. Yes, that's awesome.
the floor for one minute, in case you're listening. He's probably just carefully writing all the stuff down, so probably doesn't.
Right.
Okay. And on top of that, I don't think he needs any more recognition than he already has.
No, I mean he was involved in doing the score for Destiny, the digital video game.
Right.
Which I play sometimes.
But now I don't think he needs any SEO help now that Kanye West got him promoted and stuff. I don't think he needs any more help.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, so next step we have is called website design. There's the topic.
Okay, I mean, everybody knows that more or less you need a website if you're on the web and you're actively working there, and everybody thinks, okay, well, I just need a design, and there's a very fluid idea in how this should happen, and also some people tend to overwork it in terms of the artistic side, and really the web is very practical these days. The days when you would be impressed by an overly artistic, very heavily laden website in terms of functionality are gone. So really, your website design should be there to do two things: project what you do and serve those who come to the website, and you should do it in that order. If it fails on one, then you're not going to get anybody to actually access your services. If it succeeds on the first, and you're not making it easy for those who access your website to actually do anything, well, they're going to go away, because nobody likes jumping through hoops. So these are the things which you need to keep in mind. It should be functional, straightforward, and tie into everything else, really. You need to pay attention to the little details without getting lost in the artistic side of the design.
Exactly. So I'll add a couple 2 cents on my end here to say, because I do a lot of stuff, a lot of websites for different businesses, is number one is, and let me look in your eyes and tell you, you're not doing the website for yourself. Okay? Just remember that. If you're doing a website for the business, it's not about doing it for you, you're doing it for other people. Your audience is who you're doing the website for. So that's number one mistake that a lot of people completely do not treat correctly.
I'm very glad you said that, because I've been present in discussions with relatively mature businesses redesigning their website, and the person in charge gets the developers, and I see emails saying, can you move XYZ feature by 3 pixels?
Exactly. Up.
I'm like, what?
Exactly. Can you make, one of the comments I had one time is, can you make this blue bluer? And so then I followed that up by giving some wisdom from the technology standpoint, saying, you realize, of course, that every single monitor out there will show the colors slightly different. It's not the same thing. Yes, but can you make it a little bit bluer? So, when you're dealing with people like that who move pixels and stuff, the actual question I should have asked, which, because I'm trying to be polite and kind as a client, is, do you really think your business will improve by putting whatever % you want if this thing is a little bit bluer, or if it's up by 3 pixels? And if this person tells you that they really think that will be the case, you should just let them do their own website. You should not be doing it for them. That's my feeling. But absolutely right, what David is saying is, remember that you're not doing it for yourself, number one. Whether you're doing it yourself, creating it yourself, or you're hiring somebody to do the website for your business, it's not for you. It's for the intended audience, number one. Number two, the thing to think about it, you'll need to be involved in the process, because there's all kinds of different resources and all kinds of different web designers. So it's all wonderful. They do not know your business. Okay, you know your business, they don't. So the idea is, you cannot just simply, have them do something. You need to be involved, not in terms of moving pixels, but in terms of strategy for what the website will convey, what kind of information initially it will be started with, understanding that you're not building the website like Michelangelo did David. Okay, it's not like once you do it, you cannot change it afterwards. It's something that can be totally fluid. It can be expanded. It can be changed. You need to keep all this in mind when you initially create it, and you also need to be flexible, have it flexible enough to know that you can expand it. Don't create some kind of structure where there's no way it can potentially be expanded into more categories, more options, things like that. You need to be always flexible, thinking into the future, but you also need to start with something in a certain, fairly quickly, most of the time. So do not get into this never-ending stream of changes. Can we change this? Can we change this? Yeah, you can change all this stuff. You're never going to launch your website. So just keep those things in mind. Put yourself kind of in the background, be involved, but at the same time, if you're bringing some people in, let them do their job with your supervision and guidance business-wise, but let them do the web stuff. And you can help them with SEO. In terms of if they want to do SEO, that's fine, as long as they basically A, show you a copy of David's book, and B, follow it. Those are the key things. If they don't have a copy of David's book, don't let them do your SEO. Right, David?
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
exactly.
Definitely.
So moving on from so in terms of website design, it's a topic by itself. We're not going to go into more than that, but just those are kind of main guidelines in terms of how you should look at it. And David obviously has specific points of action in the book and everything else. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait, we're through half the book already and stuff, and you're not even asleep yet. Talking to you, audience. All right. The next step we have is called images.
Yes.
David?
The web is visual. People react to visual imagery. It used to be in the past that this was a kind of choice that you sort of did in the background. You thought, oh, I need a picture. You used to go to the picture library and pick out any kind of old picture that would do. And it's not good enough anymore for a number of reasons. First of all, we access content on mobile devices. Smaller screens make the images really leap out. If the image isn't right, if it doesn't convey the right kind of identity, the right kind of message, it's not fitting with the article, it's going to jar. We're not going to get what we expect. Also, images these days are actually being unpacked and read. Google is reading entities in a picture. So if you have a picture which actually has a very specific background, a very specific scene, which is complementary to what you're actually writing about, it reinforces everything. It makes it more like a little surface. It gets indexed better. It's a big win. In other words, you should make images are not an afterthought. They should be as central as their content which you write.
Right. And keep in mind another thing, that images are fairly easy to get these days. I mean, one of the things you need to be mindful of is you cannot just get somebody else's image and use it in your content, because a lot of images are copyrighted, and you're not supposed to be doing that.
Yes.
And before you start screaming up and down saying, well, I'm just using it for this web page, blah blah blah, it's not that simple. It's same thing as somebody coming into your restaurant and saying, I'm just going to eat this, but I'm not going to pay you, because I don't think it should be costing $10, it should be costing $8. It's not how things work. So these people who create some of this content image-wise, they want to get paid just like everybody else. I mean, they're in business as well, and we have the laws to protect digital information and other information that's created by people, so the authors get their proper due. So with that said, let's move into the area of how do you get imagery. I personally do a lot of my images, a lot of stuff I post are my own. I just, I have my phone, my trusty LG G3, which has 13 megapixel camera on the back, and it takes some phenomenal pictures. And so when I'm dealing with something, I can either go and create the image myself by shooting something specific that would work with like David was saying, with the particular post, or I just take imagery and just use existing thing, or you can shoot a lot of stuff. If you take a picture yourself and you post it, then it's your picture, it's your content, basically, essentially, inherently it's your copyright. So that's one way to do it. If you're completely the kind of person who doesn't really do pictures, they don't take photos, they have a flip phone. By the way, if you have a flip phone, you're listening to this, go get a normal phone. Don't do this kind of stuff to yourself. Self-abuse is not a good thing. And so all the phones now have pretty good cameras, and certainly able to take as many pictures as you want. Auto backup on Google Plus allows you to have these pictures automatically transferred. If you don't use Google Plus, what's wrong with you? No. What I meant to say was if you're using something like Dropbox, they have a similar capability now where you have pictures automatically uploaded. There's a number of different ways how you can get images from your cameras, from your phones, easily into your computer to be used in your online endeavors. Once you have it like on Google Plus and auto backup, then you can also have a local copy on your computer, easily synchronized, and you can drag things. I mean, it's a very simple way to get your own imagery into content on the web. So that's one thing. If you have questions about this, by all means, feel free to ask in the just on Google Plus with a post or whatever. I'll be happy to share with you what I do usually with this. If you do not take your own pictures, then another way you can do it, you can buy pictures. And the way you can buy pictures, if you buy from professional photographers, they're usually very expensive. I mean, they're pretty pricey. And also a lot of photographers, which I think is ridiculous, but that's their policy, is they charge you per use. So you pay a ton of money, and you can only use it, in a print magazine, or you can't use it on the web. So try to stay away from that. I don't mean to be, disrespectful to any photographers. I appreciate what they do and like a lot of them, but at the same time, I think it's a horrible policy. And so try to stick to people who will sell you their content and let you use it basically as much as you want wherever you want, once you pay for it, and if it's reasonably priced. If it's not, you can find somebody who is. I mean, there's plenty of people doing it. The other approach that I would recommend highly is there's several websites that are both have free stock photos as well as they have stock photos you can buy for very inexpensively. One of these sites is called Dollar Photo Club, it's called. And essentially what you do is you pay them $10 a month, and they sell you photos for $1 each. So you sign up for a membership, you pay for as long as or as little as you want. I mean, you don't have to be a member for a long time. You can just sign up for a month if you want. And you get basically for $10, you get 10 photos, so block a photo. So that way it's very inexpensive. They have excellent photography. I mean, they have, I wouldn't say it's better than anything I've seen. It's not, but at the same time they have a lot of very good quality stuff that would be very useful for social media and for websites. So you can easily get content very cheaply by doing it yourself or buying it from somebody like that. So with that being the case, let's move to next category. Next step is called podcasts.
Yes. Now, essentially, podcasts are another way of creating content. They have a very strong human element there because your voice comes across, and you may find yourself reaching an audience that is in a different mode in terms of how they access the information, or a different kind of audience altogether. And certainly, you should not discount podcasts in terms of the reach they will give you, the audience they will give you, the brand impact that you actually achieve through them.
But podcasts are strictly audio, right, David?
Yes.
I mean,
yes,
we're talking about strictly audio
absolutely,
here.
yes.
So over here, so go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say you can use YouTube as a podcast, really. I mean, you shouldn't, but it can be used in a very similar way. But yeah, I mean, you're usually talking about things like SoundCloud, and which is the YouTube equivalent for sound files, and you should have an account there.
Yes, and you can easily upload MP4 files and WAV files, and there's different formats you can use. But the important thing is to understand is that you cannot just take like a video, for example, just the audio from this video here and upload it as a podcast. You could, but then you don't see David's shiny face. You don't see his G+ pillow. I mean, it's different than in terms of conveyance than what you do in a hangout with a video than you do in audio. So you need to kind of think, if you're going to create podcasts, which are an excellent idea, you need to create content based on audio being the main way of how it's going to get disseminated. So yes, there are some things you can do that if you just take audio from a video, you can just create a podcast. A lot of people do that actually, but I think it'd be probably more beneficial if you actually think about doing podcasts as a separate endeavor, just like you would do a different post in Google Plus than you would do on Twitter, for example, because of vast difference of platforms. On Twitter, you can only do 140-character posts. It's a totally different beast, basically. So it's the same thing with this. You're only talking audio, which means you need to convey things in only audio form. You cannot do a gesture. You cannot, do anything like that. You just can't do any visual stuff, but you still need to convey the point. So there's definitely major benefits to doing podcasts, and you should look into it, but don't look at it as some kind of just a audio version of your videos. And then the next step we have is called next step is going to be podcast structured data. That's the next one, David.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now this is critical really to actually get right. Now, structured data is at the heart of semantic search. It's at the heart of pretty much any kind of technology moving forward from here on, and you really need to get to grips with it. If you're technically inclined, there are ways to do it. If you're not technically inclined, there are ways to get around it. So what you cannot do and should never do is ignore it. So really, you should be doing things to help yourself in that direction. And pretty much the entire book is intended to help towards that aspect without getting into the technicalities of it. I'm addressing it specifically in one of the chapters, one of the steps, because it has to be addressed. But if you can't program, if you can't be bothered, if it's really Chinese to you in terms of how you understand it, well, don't think you're working at a disadvantage. It's simply another obstacle to overcome, and there are things you can do to get around that.
Yeah, plus you can always fire my company. That's what we do for a living. So.
Well, that's the easy way, absolutely.
Exactly. Okay, one of those little shameless plugs we like to do here and there. Okay, so let's look at some comments here. So I'm going to read some comments, David, to get your feedback, and then we'll continue. So
okay.
Let me try some of the better ones here. We've got, let's see, I can't even pronounce the name, so I won't even try. We got somebody saying that, okay, Leela Martin says, sorry I'm late. So I guess that's not a question.
Okay, we don't need to respond to that one, obviously.
Exactly.
Except to say hi.
Exactly, and we got, I'm just joking here. You're more than welcome, late or not, that's cool. And then Zara Alteris here says that she's present, so we can actually see who's there and who's not. But thank you for coming, everybody who's watching this, and subsequently. And big thank you to Mr. William Rock, who says this is going to be a rock star show. And of course, he was talking about you, David, but still, glad that he said something like that. And getting a little bit more serious for a second, only because we have to, not because I really want to, but okay, John Ellis makes a comment, sorry I'm kind of going back to some of the previous steps. He says, why not use each social space for what it does best? And I think you already covered it. Basically, that's what you want to do.
Yes.
But you were saying your own strength, use your own strength as opposed to what, I don't know exactly what John means by what it does best. I look at it as a, I totally concur with what you said, David, but I look at it as, there's so many, the capabilities are vastly different. As I mentioned, Twitter, you can only do 140 character posts. So if you're trying to link to something, you already ate up, a bunch of that space, especially if you're using long links. Definitely don't use long links.
Absolutely.
But even if you shorten them, it's still 140 characters. It's practically nothing to just say very, very briefly something or abbreviate something to the point where nobody can understand what you're saying. So there's
a skill to it, certainly, and I think you're making an important point here. First of all, there's a skill. There's a skill set which takes practice to get right, and you can't just do it with half asleep. And the second thing is your audience is different, right? Their expectations are different. They're prepared to engage in a different way, and they're primed for different kind of engagement and interaction and content consumption, really. So these are things you need to always keep in mind.
Right. And so, yeah, no question about it. So it's the best thing to do is to address it from the both personal capability and preference and the audience standpoint in terms of where you think you'd find your audience, than from a standpoint of actually choosing a platform because of its features. And you certainly use the tools of each platform, because things like this Hangouts, for example, you can't do this on Twitter. You can certainly link to the Hangout from Twitter, and so people, if anybody came here from Twitter, thank you. If you didn't, you should have. and stuff like that. So anyway, then Aaron Siegel says, please forgive me if this was already covered. Aaron, you're always forgiven on the show, always. It says, David Amerland, is the new book you're covering linking? No, I'm sorry. Are you covering linking and the recent talk about not linked building? And has the importance of link building changed at all?
Yes and yes. I think it's actually on the steps coming up, but yes, it's covered in the book because it's really still an important part of search optimization in any kind of form. It's also part of branding, and it leads directly to the creation of relationships in the modern way of connecting the web.
Great. Next step we have, let's get back to the steps now. And before we do that, I have to say hello to Christine Drysdale, because she's just such a sweetheart always, so I have to make a special comment. Kristen, sorry. See, I can't even pronounce her name right. Kristen, right. And she's always one of the few people who is, not few people, but extremely positive, and she's a sweetheart, so I just wanted to say hello. All right, so the next step we have is called Google authorship, something that died at one point, but
yeah, okay, about that. Okay, let's think about it for a minute. I mean, yes, within Google Plus for a while we had the privilege of actually getting our thumbnails on Google search, universal search as well as personal search, and we had Google actively tracking our content and ascribing authorship, and they asked us to link to it. And you know, that was deprecated. It's not being tracked anymore for many different reasons. And on universal search, our thumbnails don't show up there. They still show up on personal search. So if you just take personal search on its own, if we think that personal search has to do with social media activity, it has to do with context and relationships and relationship building and all the things which go with it, there's value just in that. So you should still continue doing that. But beyond that, Google is essentially invested still in understanding who creates what content on what basis. And they're doing it through a wide variety of mechanisms. They've abandoned what they set up here, but they're still actually trying to do it. So anything which you do which helps in that direction is good practice, and it's going to really benefit you as we move forward. So this is one of those activities which has a tangential impact on SEO, huge value as we move forward, and essentially search and search engine optimization shouldn't be the things which you need to do right now and abandon tomorrow, because that's ridiculous. You know, we've had years and years of that practice up to about 2012. So really moving forward, everything that should be done should be incrementally helping us gain, and it should be sustainable. And this is part of it.
Right. And the 2012 reference was initially everybody thought that the whole thing, you know, we were all going to be gone in 2012. And so that's why the whole thing kind of changed from there. Just
we have semantic
exactly, a little bit of history there. Exactly. And also, you know, you can use Google authorship this way for a little bit of, ego stroking, because you do a search, and if you're using the personal search, like David mentioned, your picture comes up. If you have a post, dealing with that particular topic, which is cool. You know, you get to see your own face directly on Google search, which is pretty nice, if you need that kind of attention to yourself. All right. Next thing we have is called Google My Business.
Yes. Now, we're talking about businesses which set up a local presence. There are a lot of businesses which have local search these days is impacted upon by very much the same kind of trends that global search had. It used to be something almost entirely different, and it's not anymore. So really, identity, value, the ability to actually have connective relationships which help surface things, these are still very important, very, very important in local search, along with the local search stuff which has to do with location. You have location-aware devices these days where search results actually surface on, and things like reviews and having a presence on Google Maps. All these things help, and that's where this comes in. Google has put a lot of money recently in this front from a marketing point of view. They've bolstered their marketing team there. They've got a huge support group, and this is an indication of how important it is in terms of surfacing local businesses. And if you run a local business, if you have a bricks and mortar presence, you should really be there. If you're not, you're missing out on a huge slice of the action.
Yeah, and I was going to add that basically, obviously, a lot of this has to do with the kind of business you're running. For example, my business, which is consultancy, IT, in terms of information technology, internet, web development, customized business systems, all of that kind of stuff. Most of the efforts come from this very place I'm sitting at right now. So it's not as important as anybody who is running brick and mortar or something where they actually have a location and they want people to come. It becomes essential, basically, to have that kind of deal. Because if you think about it, if you're running a restaurant, as an example, and you're serving breakfast, if you do a search for breakfast, you're going to find a zillion different entries. And just because there's a great breakfast place in San Diego, that doesn't do me much good here in Seattle. So the local thing becomes extremely important and extremely useful because there is only so many places around me that are important to go to. And if I do have Google nicely set up Google page with reviews, as David mentioned, and things like that, absolutely you're going to get traffic. Absolutely. And if you consider the amount of effort that's going into the whole mobile space and the actual use of mobile devices, which is why there's so much effort into mobile space, with people using tablets, people using phones, smartphones, not flip phones, then it's no question that it makes all the sense in the world to go ahead, go through the motions. It doesn't take much time to set up your own business page and go through their verification process where they make sure they send you a little postcard to make sure you're you and stuff, and it's many benefits. So definitely, if you're a business that's brick and mortar type place that has a location, absolutely it's essential that you set this up. Speaking of mobile, there goes my mobile phone, so I have to flip it to stop it. Now next is a very important topic, which is one of the key steps for me in this book is called Hangouts on Air, which is what we're doing right now.
Yes. Okay. I mean, Hangouts on Air is an incredibly powerful branding tool. It helps. I mean, it's content creation at its best, and it's easy to repurpose. And because of that, it actually has significant impact in terms of how you surface across the web, and also the kind of relationships you form, which in social media space, which also help on your reputation, on your brand power, on the trust you create, and your trustworthiness, all those things essentially, which a business needs to have in mind. I must say that from a business point of view, it's probably the biggest hurdle for them to overcome, because it's unscripted as far as the environment goes. It can go, there's a sense of loss of control in terms of brand power and brand values. They have to be able to trust their audience, and they have to be able to trust their own ability to actually communicate in a way that makes it as unambivalent as possible. A lot of businesses are not ready to be there yet. Those who are doing great. And I've used Hangouts on Air personally as an experiment on a couple of times, and essentially I was able to have incredible results in search just using Hangouts as a vehicle.
Yeah, I haven't done any case studies or anything, but I use Hangouts extensively myself. Obviously, if we didn't have that, I wouldn't even be able to do this, what I'm doing with David right now. In terms of having trust in like David said, in people in the audience, you can see that explains why we don't have anybody with me and him in the Hangout. Just kidding. But seriously though, it's one of these deals where it's a tremendous tool for just about any business. Just for the record, David and I, all the Hangouts we do not script them at all. We come up with a game plan in terms of what we're going to talk about as a topic, and I usually wind up inviting David saying, do you want to talk about this? And he just comes back. He's never said no before, which is what makes David Amerland one of the few out there that always says yes to just about anything I ask him. And it makes it very easy to just sit down and talk, be yourself, like we talked about being yourself, so people can actually see you for what you are and make their own determination whether they like it or not. But you can really get your business out there and yourself out there, because a lot of times, one of the things we talked about identity, and we talked about having profile for yourself and for your page, for your business page, two different entities that are completely intertwined. Yes, I'm me. I'm the guy who likes the Beatles. I'm the guy who takes pictures of clouds. I'm the guy who likes to listen to jazz rock, things like that. But I'm also an IT consultant. So if you go to my productive computer systems page, which is just nothing but business stuff, IT stuff, then you'll see my business persona. But at the same time, it's linked to my personal profile where you see me as the guy who loves the Beatles and things like that. So you have this human connection basically that you have online, but you can build it much more so in having something like this because you really can actually see, you can see what David is like. You can see his environment. Excuse me, you can see me cough. You can see what he is about, the kind of person he is. You can tell a lot from watching this kind of interaction in a hangout, and of course you can interact. One of the things, I mean, no question, if you look at your kids and you constantly tell them don't watch so much TV, it's because that's what we as people like. We like to watch moving things, and that's why TV is the absolutely top media in terms of what people like the most. So think of this as your personal TV, and you can turn it into a personal TV channel if you wish. It's easy enough. It doesn't cost anything. No big deal. You just put a little time into it, and then you can be yourself. You don't need to come up with anything complicated, any kind of specific stuff that you do on ABC or anything like that. Just be yourself. That's the best way to do it, and just present to the audience, which is looking at the camera. Right here, I'm looking in your eyes, just like you're looking at mine. Present whatever you need to present, being yourself, and Hangouts allow you to do that, and then you invite additional people in, like right now I have David in there, where you can actually make it interactive, and you can interact with your vendors, you can interact with your partners, you can interact with your customers. I mean, it's phenomenal what you can do. I have several clients that are running my systems that I developed many years ago in Idaho. I live in Washington State, so I'm basically, whatever it is, 800 miles away, or something like that, from them. I can't just jump in the car and go help them out. I can't. But via the internet, I'm able to jump in and remotely help them out. But that's only part of it. I'm able to jump in and actually see them and talk to them and have a lot more stuff done. If we need to have a meeting, we have the CEO of the company in San Francisco. We have one of the key managers in McCall, Idaho. We have another, for example, manager in Sun Valley, Idaho, and I'm here in Kirkland, Washington. And we have meetings in this kind of environment where we can discuss whatever needs to be discussed. And of course, Hangout on Air takes it to the next step, because not only can you have the interaction and discussion and everything else, but you can also have it automatically be recorded on YouTube and then available as a private or a public YouTube video for, ability to be able to allow people to watch it later, just like I'm sure people will be watching this video after the fact. But more importantly, is that Google being the #1 search engine in the world, YouTube is the #2 search engine in the world. So you wind up creating content by just having this conversation specifically to address the indexing needs as well, which is the whole part of the SEO strategy.
Agreed, yep.
Okay, David concurs, great. YouTube is the next one, speaking of YouTube.
Well, I think this feeds into pretty much what we've been saying until now, and it's just a little bit more of a how to use YouTube very specifically. But essentially, video creation and video content is very important. The web is very visual, and it should not be discounted. And as you said, it is the #2 search engine in the world after Google, and you should really be there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the 4 V's is the next step.
Yes, and this is more of a conceptual chapter in the book, but essentially, whenever we talk about anything that has to happen across the web, it's governed by a big data component. Data is governed by 4 elements, and they're basically the 4 V's which we talk about. It's velocity and variety, and veracity, which is one of them, and volume is the 4th. So in their combination, these 4 determine essentially how effective is something which you do, how it is perceived, what impact it has. It's a little bit technical, but essentially everything which we do is governed by technicality. And to make the case, if we take that, this Hangout, for instance, if it goes viral, what does that mean? It means essentially it gets reshared, so we begin to get velocity across the web. That is a signal in itself. If people begin to play off it and talk about it, then we get variety of the content. That is another signal again in itself about its importance. If on the basis of this Hangout we then produce another 10 very similar ones, that's the volume which we create. All of these together begin to filter veracity, how right and how correct and how valid the information that is displayed and given here actually is. And that is the thinking that should be taken into account every time you formulate any kind of strategy on the web. Strategy is not about projecting something which is not true. It is actually using the tools we have and the way they integrate and actually making the best use of them.
All right, so now we're getting to the the only step in the book, I might add, that actually is double quoted. And the double quotes, inside double quotes, it says from strings to things.
Yes. And that's, this is what Google came out with essentially when they brought in semantic search. It's a true game changer in the full sense of the word. And to simplify it, it took the representation of code that was only existing as code pretty much on its own. It didn't have any kind of impact, didn't have a lot of connectivity behind it, and it links it now to presence. It links it to real things and real people. So the code now actually represents something very real, which means a lot of work which goes into the background. And this is, again, another conceptual thing you need to bring in mind. It sort of ties everything together because it is about what we discussed in the beginning. It's about identity, presence, content, voice, and all those things that go into it.
Yes. Finally, we have a last step called links and keywords.
Yes, and anybody who's been active in search and search engine optimization since the beginning knows that you really needed two things only, right? You needed to buy some links for a website because that really bumped up its page rank and really got you onto the rankings on Google's search engine, and you needed to have keywords because that's how your content came up. And there used to be a spreadsheet. It was very spreadsheet-driven business where search engine optimizers used to work off them and report on where the keywords were each time in terms of ranking every month. And there's a dollar price attached to that, and they used to look at the link building efforts. There's a dollar price, and really what happened is we abused it to death. Not our fault in itself, and this is human economic behavior. The moment we understand how something works, what do? We basically apply it. Okay, Everybody does it to some extent. If you don't, you're either a saint or you shouldn't be in business. So really, when it comes to semantic search, human economic behavior tends to not apply so much because essentially the number of things which we have to do become a lot more complicated. And link building itself has changed. Very recently John Mueller, who's the head of Webmaster Tools, said in a video that if you have a link building strategy in place, then most likely you're going to be wrong-footed by that, and you're going to get penalized. And what he meant is don't go out looking to build links. Create instead the kind of content that people want to link to. Still the same strategy at heart, but the approach is entirely different. And that's what he was trying to get at. This is exactly what I'm trying to point out here in terms of how links have changed. And also keywords. We used to look at keywords and use them to create content around, thinking that this is going to help us with Google search, which it did in the past. It doesn't work anymore. You really need to have content which is really valuable and it answers very specific questions your audience really wants to find out. Will that content contain keywords? Most probably, yes, but it doesn't have to. There's going to be search queries which are going to come up and it'll bring up your content which are not really keyword linked, but they're linked in terms of the theme and the overall content. So you need to bear that in mind.
And you also have, of course, the deal with sound, and you have the deal with video. So all these things play a part. It's not just about text words, even though it's also not to diminish the text words themselves also.
Yes.
So, all right. So I'm here. I'm sorry, I'm looking sideways a little bit. I'm going to bring up this picture here, which is right here. So that's the book. I have 20 steps. Like I said, each step has 10 items, and we kind of went in a very bird's eye view, so to speak, without going to a lot of details, but at the same time we covered some of the details, so you have an idea of what this kind of information this book has. Obviously, it's pretty clear that the book is fairly in depth on the subject, and it's something that needs to be read. Because just listening to this hangout gives you an idea, but it doesn't give you the actual information, and that's where you get from the book. And remember, Jerry Maguire says you need to help me help you. So it's the same kind of deal here. David basically has this book, and he's saying that he can help you if you help yourself. So the way you help yourself is by buying his book. You're helping him help you with your business. Does that sound pretty good?
That's probably the best explanation of a sale I've ever heard.
Excellent, excellent. So we'll
Yeah,
take.
that's awesome.
With that, a couple of things. One thing I'm going to do here is I usually don't like to drop bombs on David, which he doesn't love, but he won't hold it against me. So one of the things that I came up with this morning, that's why I haven't checked with David yet, and I will definitely gladly take it down if he doesn't approve, is I think it would be very much of a positive to have a community specifically for this book. And my thinking was that the community would have categories being basically each step. I don't know if you, David, can you see the display?
I can, yes, and I think it's a great idea actually, because if we get, I mean, essentially, to me, the greatest value of the social connection is the ability of people to share information and actually become smarter in what they do. And
right. So over here, my thinking was this: that the book, I mean, this community is about nothing but this book, okay, or things in this book. So we're not going to be going esoterical. We're not going to be posting any cloud wars pictures here. It's strictly about the book. And then each step would be clearly identified as a category here. As you can see on the left, I just started it. I was able to just pour content, I mean, concrete, but it's not in stone yet. And so it's not totally done, but it'll have all 20 steps. I was thinking we would have a general discussion, we would have Q&A, we would have success stories in terms of people using this book specifically, kind of like case studies, basically, if you will. And it would have some specific posts dealing with the book by David, since this is all about his book and he's the man. I thought we would have a separate category with some posts that are segregated from the rest of the content that way. So that's what I was thinking, David. Like I said, we can, if you like it, we can keep it, we can adjust it.
I think that's a great idea, and thank you for actually doing that. It's very proactive of you. And yes, I think this is beautiful because if you get a lot of people who actually engage in these things and they share their own direct experience of how they customized the advice in the book, I think that becomes a huge plus for everybody. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the each step, discussing in more detail specific things about that particular step, I think would be extremely beneficial to a lot of people, because if they have any questions specifically for a particular set of actions in a particular chapter, particular step, then they can easily go to that particular category in this community and then interact with people, see what they've done. I think it would be very helpful to kind of make it a little bit more interactive instead of just reading the book and trying to do everything on their own. So you wind up having a community that kind of you're working with to get things done, which is, I think, would be a tremendous help. That's why I thought about it. So sorry,
I think
David.
that's a fantastic idea. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll keep that one. Sounds like David will become the owner of this community as soon as he takes over, and then whoever he decides to moderate, it will be up to him. This is definitely not my gig. It's his thing, so that's one thing. So in terms of interaction, one of the things that David and I worked on, and that's another last thing before we leave here that I'd like to share with you, is we thought it would be very convenient and useful to be able to manage the whole wealth of information in this book, and specifically your information, in a centralized, living and breathing type environment. And so what we came up with was a Google form, essentially. That's what it's built on, and you're looking at it right now, which will be available to people soon. We're done with it mostly, but not totally yet. And essentially what you will see in this form is you will see all the steps clearly identified with what they are, and there's the very first line in the book, David has a quote for every single one of these steps. All of these specific lines for each step, they're listed right underneath it. And then you have the 10 action items numbered, like this is step 1, so you have 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. And step 2 will have 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, things like that. And so essentially what you have is instead of just reading a book and trying to come up with all this information, there's too much information. Because like I said, you take 20 steps times 10 action steps, you wind up with 200 items you need to think about and do something with, and to try to keep all these 200 items in your head all the time is a difficult task. So this makes it much simpler. because it either asks you specific questions, and you can keep track of where you're at, what you've done, what you still need to do, as well as put your thoughts down for other chapters or other steps. Like most of these in the beginning are just yes, no, but as you can see, there's plenty as you get going. There's basically, it's a free-form text fields that allow you to click and type in your information, and all of this information will be stored, so you can, and the way it'll be set up where you'll be able to easily come back to it and augment it to be moving with the time. So you initially set up this whole, think of it, like I said, as a companion tool for the book that enables you to read through the book. So you still need to read all the chapters. I mean, you cannot have this without the book. You have to have the book to make sense of this tool for you. And then as you do each book, and as you do these action steps David has in each book, 10 per step, you'll see that you'll be able to record these right here, and it tells you exactly what it's asking for directly from the book. You know, each action step is listed here for one. At the bottom, you will see a link to the book itself. So if you happen to come across it, you don't have the book yet, that's where you click to actually get it. And then I believe this goes to Amazon, right, David? Or does it go?
Yeah, it goes to my website.
Oh, it goes to David. Yeah, it goes to David's website for that deal, and from there you can buy it from there. And then, of course, when you get done, it shows you how much you completed so far. So as you fill this out, you just click on continue. All of these steps here, all of these items, I should say, that are shown here are not mandatory, which means you can put as much information as you want or as little as you want, and then you'll be able to get back to it and get back to it and get back to it to continue to fill it out, because you can't sit down in one take and do 200 items with the proper amount of strategy and thinking. I mean, a lot of the stuff you really need to sit and think about every single step. And some of these things it just tells you, make sure you have good quality photographs and so on and so forth. But you have some other steps like this 3.5. It says, explain how your Google Plus business page will source content, what that content will be, what is its intent in terms of branding, its intent in terms of branding and sales, and how you will decide its ROI. I mean, that's a big mouthful and a lot of things to consider and put down. And the idea is you sit down, read this, and you start putting some thoughts down. You do some thinking, you talk to people, you strategize, and you put the content down. By the time you get done, all these things will be filled out. And when I say you get done, it's probably going to be most likely a multi-day, maybe multi-week even process, maybe multi-months, I don't know. It just depends on how fast you want to go through it. But the idea being you keep going, going, and eventually you wind up, having all these different steps filled out, all the information there. And I will show you in a separate hangout, because the details of how to be able to get to this information over and over, and also be able to come up with alternate versions for potentially, if you have multiple businesses, you'll be able to have multiple incarnations of this thing and be able to get to the right ones fairly easily. And also the idea is that you don't want to be creating information all the time, it's redoing it. You just want to continue working on the same set for the same company until you get it totally done. And then subsequently, when things change in your business, you might want to reread this blueprint, make sure that you have everything the way it's supposed to be, or possibly augment it as business evolves, because business constantly changes. And some things that you did before may not apply anymore or may need to be augmented, so you modify this thing, but you use it as your main SEO guide and your main SEO blueprint, and it allows you to basically get interactive with the book, if you will. David, a few words on this?
Well, I think it's basically, think of it as a work in progress or a living document. As your business gets refined, you'll be able to come back and actually see what you've done and what else you need to do, and it'll help become a nice springboard for developing your business further. It's a handy way of actually keeping all those questions, all those 200 action points in one place, and you have a progress bar, I believe. Is that right, Oleg?
Correct, at the bottom of each one, yes.
Okay.
But also keep in mind that you can jump to any of these things at any time. It's not like you have to get the first one done before you can jump to the second one. You can jump between them any way you want. I wanted to set it up to be as flexible, as easy to get to and get to the information as possible without putting any kind of special limitations that you have to get the first 3 steps done before you can jump to the 4th one. You may be thinking about something, or something came up dealing with the 4th one, so do the 4th one first. I mean, that's okay. And so you'll be able, the progress bar is there, it shows you how much, on which page you are basically. But if you are going to do it from beginning to end, like you read David's book, then by all means you'll see the progress bar at the bottom showing you how much you've done so far, and you can see how much more you have to go. So we think it's going to be a useful, at least I do, think it's going to be a very useful companion to the book, and I hope everybody likes it and everybody starts using it. I will have a separate hangout talking about the technical end of it in terms of how to implement it, so you can have multiple companies in there, and so you can be able to change easily the same information. So it actually requires a little bit more hand-holding and explanation, so I don't want to dilute this hangout with that. So I will have a separate thing, because it'll be also useful for you to set up some other forms in Google+. A lot of people don't know you can even do this kind of stuff in a specific way, how I'm going to show it. So we're going to do a hangout on that. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share here and go back to David here. And I just wanted to say that, David, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you very much. I love the format. Thank you very much for actually doing all that, because it took so much time, and I think it's going to be useful for people to also learn how you did it, because these are tools which are freely available from Google Drive, and not everybody knows how to use them, and actually they should be part of our digital literacy. So it'd be great to actually see it.
Great, great. Again, thank you very much for the book, and thank you very much for the time. Always a pleasure to talk to you, always. And
same here, Oleg. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so everybody, stop whatever you're doing, go get the book. The book is called SEO Help. Let me see if I got a picture here. Oh, anyway, you know what the book looks like. 20 steps, semantic search steps to help your business grow. The book is available on Amazon.com. The book is available at Barnes & Noble, and both print and digital editions. You can also get a bunch of information on David's very cool-looking site at davidamerland.com. If you're not one of the hundreds of thousands of people following David in Google+, you should be, for obvious reasons. And with that said, I will say goodbye until next time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And David, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.